At 6:01 a.m., I opened my door in socks and found a woman with a perfect bob and a clipboard telling me I owed $500 and had 30 days to relocate. My coffee wasn't even poured yet, and she was already trying to evict a family history by sunset. She'd bring actors in windbreakers, waving fake badges, and yeah, that happened. But the part she didn't know was that I'd spent 15 years writing the very rules she was trying to weaponize. My name's Mason Cole. I came back to Red Bluff, Arizona to keep my granddad's patch of earth breathing. 38 acres of creosote wind, one tin roof, barn, patched by a man with more grit than nails. Mornings here. Smell clean of meadowlarks. Tune the day, the kind of quiet that makes you tell the truth without meaning to. And then there's Leslie Hart, president of the brand new Sagebrush Meadows HOA, pressed up against my south fence, perfume like industrial vanilla, and a smile that says rules are a love language. She tapped a paper stamped in red, odors visual, blight property values. And I said, as even as I could, ma'am, that walking path didn't exist until 6 months ago, and your covenant doesn't reach my fence, and she cocked her head like a cat eyeing a lizard. Not for long, slid the citation into my hand and started photographing my chickens, like they were fugitives. You know what I mean? 3 days later, I sat in a clubhouse dressed up as a courtroom long table for 12 board members, with little silver saguaro pins. One metal chair for me, set 12 feet away, like a Defendant's Island coffee, that tasted like it was brewed. When cassette tapes were cool. Leslie clicked her slideshow, agricultural operations, impact on community standards, circles and arrows. Over my barn, labeled structural eyesore, my manure pile upgraded to biological hazard, and my chickens promoted to disease vectors. Immediate removal of livestock, she read. Screening of blight, and I just asked for the recorded covenants and the articles of incorporation, simple as that, and placed my old state housing compliance card on the table the room inhaled. Those require legal review, she said. We can't hand proprietary material to outside parties, and I said, proprietary is a cute word for public records, I'll wait. I didn't raise my voice. I let the silence do what silence does. A soft voice behind me, Olivia Park, retired teacher, asked Leslie if she hadn't told them I was just some local rancher, and Leslie laughed like tinfoil. Anybody can print a business card, and I went home knowing exactly what would come next, because I've seen this playbook too many times. Monday brought county code enforcement. Trent Hart, a cousin, if we're keeping score, clipboard thick enough to stop a bullet. Unpermitted structures, he said. Wanting documentation for fence posts. My granddad said in 1963. Tuesday brought a state environmental inspector taking soil and water under a sun that could bake a pie on the hood. Every test clean and cleaner. Wednesday brought a state ag vet, Dr. Carlos Rivera, checking gums and temps in coal. Your cattle are healthier than most of my colleagues, he said with a grin. The pattern was clear. If you can't prove a violation, drown a man in the cost of disproving one. I wasn't surprised I was taking notes. Thursday. Olivia's little gray hatchback came up my drive in a dust ribbon. She held a travel mug like a life preserver and said she hadn't slept. Rusty, my old blue heeler, put his head on her knee like he invoices for therapy and dog biscuits. We spread papers across my table, texts, emails, statements, and watched a picture form Horizon Vista. The developer feeding Leslie inside info on adjoining parcels, promising her a $50,000 finder's fee and first pick of a premium lot. if she could solve the nuisance and secure acquisition. The HOA legal services budget leaked into a private account. A neat $121,000, and change gone in 8 months. And the kicker, the HOA hadn't filed articles of incorporation with the state, no covenants recorded at the county. The whole production had the legal authority of a lemonade stand with a broken pitcher, so all the threats. Olivia whispered they never had any weight, and I said, they had theater, and theater moves people when they're tired and want a simple story. And I'll admit something in me softened for those neighbors. They came for sunsets and clean kitchens. Not a con, but a con is what they got. Friday morning, Channel 5 parked at my gate. Leslie gathered a dozen residents and a few kids in masks, talked about airborne contaminants and unsanitary conditions. The camera panned across my cattle, like they might cough for B-roll. Then, real neighbors spoke plain. Mr. Cardenas saying my granddad taught him to mend fence in '72. Rosa at the feed store saying if my stock were sick, she'd be the first to know. By 6 o'clock, the story had shifted from pollution to conflict of interest. Cameras, love receipts, and I figured rot spreads. So Monday, I filed what needed filing. HUD fair housing for discriminatory harassment of an agricultural lifestyle, the State Real Estate Board for fraud and undisclosed conflicts, and one neat intake with the FBI's financial crimes folks. Because when you impersonate authority using mail and wires, you're no longer just rude, you're federal. Inside the subdivision, Olivia walked board members through her ledger. 3 resigned. In 48 hours, 2 demanded an accounting. Leslie blasted leadership emails that read like a supervillain monologue, and then the stunts hit the gas. Someone spray painted. Health hazard on my fence at 2 a.m. My cameras grabbed the whole thing audio, catching a whisper that sounded a lot like bigger letters. Trent. Insurance loves photos. Sheriff Dana Brooks came by for a chat about a supposed threatening phone call I'd made to Leslie. We pulled logs, played the vandalism clip, watched the sheriff rub her temples and sigh. The sigh of a person paid to sort adults from their worst ideas. I've chased nonsense, she said. But this is performance art, and I couldn't argue. 2 days later, a used sedan rolled up with 2 people in windbreakers, stamped environmental protection, and badges you could buy online. If your conscience was on vacation, the lead guy read from a script, under the Federal Emergency Health Protection Act. And I raised a hand like a math teacher. There is no Federal Emergency Health Protection Act listed the real statutes that actually exist. Asked for IDs on the hood. The woman's hand shook. The man looked at the road like it might save him. What they didn't know was that my filings had pinged. Old colleagues. And real agents had been watching from a comfortable distance, collecting connecting recording. The moment amateurs pretended to be the government on my gravel. The pair mumbled about returning to headquarters. I suggested they fix the spelling on prosecution. On page 2, they left in a hurry. An hour later, Leslie posted selfies with the fake windbreakers, announced success, called a special meeting to celebrate federal intervention, and I told myself to sleep. But if you've ever had your life turned into someone else's theater, you know, sleep isn't always available. Wednesday morning, she tried one more physical move. Showed up at my south gate with Trent and 2 other guys and bolt cutters to assist with voluntary livestock evacuation. And if that phrase makes your eye twitch, same. My cameras rolled. Sheriff Brooks rolled faster. Red and blue, painting my fence. The men scattered like quail. Leslie froze mid-cut. Step away from the gate. Ms. Hart. the sheriff said, voice flat as a yardstick. And I didn't cheer, I let the truth breathe. Let the truth. That night, the community center filled with neighbors and a couple of plain clothes faces who wear their normal like a uniform. Leslie walked out like she was about to be knighted. Clicked the first slide. Federal intervention. Community protected. And Olivia stood voice steady now. Where is the $121,000 from operations? The room thumped with that special silence where trust cracks. I walked the aisle, took the clicker from Leslie's hands. Hit next. Not her deck. Olivia's. Bank statements laddering into a private account. Texts from Horizon Vista, promising a finder's fee. Night vision photos of my fence. Bleeding red paint. Audio. Whispering bigger letters. The crowd gasped. A few people swore under breath. Someone started to cry. Leslie reached out like she wanted to push the words back into our mouths. He is fabricating this. Coordinated attack. He threatened me, and Sheriff Brooks lifted a hand. We've already pulled the logs, and then a woman near the aisle flipped a small leather case. I'm Special Agent Lauren Pierce, she said. Calm enough to quiet a storm. Ms. Hart, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and mail fraud. For civil rights violations under color of law, and for directing impersonation of federal authority. Two agents moved like they'd practiced cuffs. Clicked the room, let out the breath it had been hoarding for months. Agent Pierce turned at the door. For the record, Mr. Cole's operation is fully compliant. Ms. Hart has been under multi-county investigation victim services info, is at the back, and that was that. Later, I sat on my porch, with Rusty's head on my boot, night air, clean again. And I thought about how fast helpless flips to resolve once you see the cards. Not when the cuffs click earlier, at your own table with a retired teacher and a stack of truth. I thought about how decent people can be steered by a confident voice, and how rules are tools they build, or they hit, and we decide who holds them. You know what I mean? We'll argue for weeks about fences and meetings, and who should have asked what some will say. HOAs keep things nice. Some will say clipboards are scepters. The truth sits boring and solid in the middle. Accountability matters. Documents matter. Patience matters. And bullies count on you not knowing any of that. I changed a few shapes and names because privacy deserves respect. But the bones stand there was a 6 a.m. Knock a fake hearing with bad coffee trucks that took samples from honest soil. A teacher who got tired of being polite. A sheriff who read the room. And a woman who loved power more than the people who gave it to her. No parade, just 2 ibuprofen and fence work at dawn. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me if you've been buried in paper, or shamed in a meeting, or told to move from a place that fits your bones. Who do you think was right? What did I miss? What would you have done at my door? Drop your story and your take hit it like you're. If this helped you breathe a little easier, subscribe. If you want more true stories, told plain, and if you're fighting your own clipboard right now, ask for the documents. Keep records, make the call. And when someone tries to write your life in red ink, say calmly, as politely as you can put it on a real letterhead, and step off my porch.